Jair Bolsonaro is very Trumpian in many ways, but lately, when you see the way that he's been handling the Brazilian presidential elections, you see even more similarities, and more importantly, you see that he goes even further than Trump was willing to go. So he's trying to prepare to steal the election. In fact, during a vote for his bill to change the voting system, he literally sent tanks and the military to parade outside of Congress. Now, let me give you more details on what he's been up to, and just understand that his opponent is Lula da Silva, who he made a political prisoner in the last presidential election because da Silva was very likely to win. He was the favorite. He's the one who lifted people out of poverty in Brazil. He is, just an incredible leader, and Bolsonaro doesn't want to have to deal with him. So at first he was a political prisoner in the last election, and now Jair Bolsonaro is trying to steal the election in other ways. Beleaguered by the devastating toll of the coronavirus, a sputtering economy, and a surging rival, Bolsonaro has launched a full-throated attack on the electronic voting system in Brazil, and Brazil has relied on for 25 years, unless voters get to record their choice on paper ballots, which the current system doesn't allow. Bolsonaro has warned that the 2022 election could be suspended. So he's doing what Trump did in the lead up to the 2020 election here in the United States. He's arguing that there could be widespread voter fraud and that these electronic voting systems are not to be relied on. They need paper ballots, but they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the ability to include paper ballots in this process. And there's been no evidence of widespread fraud. So why would he try to suspend the elections other than just attempt to steal the election from Lula da Silva for the second time? An election outside those parameters is not an election, Bolsonaro told supporters during a recent rally, calling on his base to prepare to fight with all the weapons. The campaign for a return to a paper ballot system, a longtime obsession of Bolsonaro's, has alarmed leaders in the judiciary, opposition lawmakers, and political scientists who see in his playbook the markings of a power grab in Latin America's largest nation. Election officials and independent experts say Brazil's electronic voting system, which was adopted in 1996, has strong safeguards and a stellar track record. Now, I have more details about this in just a minute, but Lance, I wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in.
So I got a quote from him from 1993, and it says, "I support a dictatorship. We will never resolve serious national problems with this irresponsible democracy." There's been a couple times when people have hearkened to Jair Bolsonaro and thought perhaps he does show signs of someone who's going to engage in corruption. And if you followed the Operation Car Wash scandal, and I think Michael Brooks and his reporting on that was pretty seminal to anyone who was following it, there's a different way in which business is done in that country. And obviously, coming from a Western lens, we like to look at this as if oh, this just seems like underhanded dealings, politicians exchanging money for grants to be able to build buildings and stuff like that. But in some countries, this is the way business is done. In this case, they did a sting operation in which they ended up jailing his political opponent, who it said that he would have won. Lula da Silva would have effectively beaten Jair Bolsonaro. When you're talking about Lula da Silva, what does he stand for? It's unfortunate that we were just talking ill of Glenn Greenwald, because his interview with Lula da Silva from prison, as well as the late Michael Brooks interview with Lula da Silva, really brings into character why I believe this man is going to win, and win handedly. And that is, they asked him multiple times, what does it feel like to be in prison? Are you okay? What's it like to be in your jail cell? How are you surviving? And his response was, I have a bed, I have food, and I have a very comfortable life. He's like, the millions and millions of Brazilians who live within a 1 meter square little hut where they have to poo and have sex. He actually used much more vulgarity. I keep forgetting we're on the PG version, but where they have to poo and make love in this same square little 1 meter hut. Those are the ones you should be concerned about. Those are the ones you should be asking about. Those are the people who are suffering, not me. So it really, I implore anyone who hasn't seen it just to watch it, to see the difference and contrast the two gentlemen who are running in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the people of Brazil are very aware of which leader would serve their best interests, which is why in the last election process, Lula da Silva was very likely to win. He was polling far better than Bolsonaro was. And the same thing is happening this time around. Now, Bolsonaro appears to be using a different strategy to try to steal this election. And it is pretty terrifying, especially given the quote from Bolsonaro that you read earlier, and also some of the stunts that he's engaged in recently. So to give you a sense of what the polling currently says in regard to the two candidates, a poll conducted in early August by the firm Poder Data shows that 1 in every 5 voters who supported Bolsonaro in 2018 would now vote for his main rival, former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. In a 2-candidate matchup, da Silva would trounce the incumbent 52% to 32%, and that is why Bolsonaro is now kind of relying on all of these stunts, claims about voter fraud tied to the electronic voting systems. The prospect of a destabilizing showdown next year loomed as Bolsonaro's government organized a military parade in which armored tanks rumbled past Congress just hours before legislators were scheduled to debate a bill that would require electronic voting machines to print paper ballots. The lower house of Congress voted to reject the proposal. And look, it's a little funny because apparently he was using, like, it was a 10-minute military parade. It was meant to intimidate members of Congress. Many also regarded the president's tank parade, which lasted only 10 minutes and featured a distinctly limited selection of fume-spewing military hardware, as a fiasco. For instance, Marcelo Soares, a Sao Paulo-based journalist, called the pageant a legitimate show of farce, which I think is pretty funny. So look, I don't want to make too much light of that because who knows what he's capable of doing. I mean, we've already seen his ability to turn his political opponent into a literal political prisoner. So I don't want to underestimate him, but at the same time, the will of the people is pretty clear based on the polling, and Lula da Silva is popular for a reason. He's not popular because Bolsonaro is unpopular, right? I think oftentimes in our electoral system, it's like, vote for me because I'm not the other guy. But in this situation, we're talking about a former president in Brazil who lifted people out of poverty, who actually put himself on the line to do so. And more importantly for me, his resilience as he was a political prisoner speaks volumes, because he remained undeterred and he kept fighting and he didn't let that despair destroy his spirit. I think that that's an incredible feat, especially as you're serving time in prison for a crime you didn't commit. All right.
Yeah. On top of which, I was just going to quickly say one reason I think everyone should consider this to be an incredibly important election, even if you don't follow global politics, is that in terms of the environment right now, this is one of the tipping points, is the Brazilian rainforest getting burnt down in record percentages because Jair Bolsonaro has just done a policy of clear cutting areas to make way for cattle grazing. So getting him out is also something, I don't want to sound hyperbolic like Captain Planet, but it could go towards saving the earth on top of everything else.
Absolutely. We just covered a story a few weeks ago about how the Amazon rainforest is now emitting CO2 because of so much deforestation. And so our planet is on the line with this election. And so I hope the people of Brazil fight and elect the right person here.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.